It's that time of the year again for us Mass Effect fans. Let's talk about everything we know about the next Mass Effect game. What I'm going to do today is do what essentially is going to be like a video blog. If you want well scripted videos with good editing and nice B-roll and lots of showing and not telling, there's lots of other great creators you can go check out. I'm sure Kala is going to put out a great video about the same subject, Mr. Holton, and so on. If you instead want to hear me ramble on for a while about everything we've learned about the next Mass Effect back to 2020, then let's hang out. If you're new to the channel, you don't know who I am Morgan, also known as Bon Diesel. I am a pretty new Mass Effect fan as of the Legendary Edition. This is despite the fact that I'm old, and I actually worked at GameStop when 2 of the 3 games were released. I worked their midnight releases, yet I never played. I've alleviated that huge problem in the recent years, and I'm 20 plus playthroughs into the series, and I'm really excited about the next game. So I want to do another one of these videos in the run up to N7 Day 2024. Let's look at everything that we've seen, that they've shown us. I'll do a little speculation, a little of my personal thoughts and things like that. And we are going to begin that right now. Okay, to kick it off, we are going to start in 2020. This was an interesting year for Mass Effect. This was when they announced Mass Effect the Legendary Edition. This is when Casey Hudson was still at BioWare. He had come back, I believe, in 2018. We'll address that again. And they had put out what really probably appeared to be a fairly mundane N7 Day post. Although the Legendary Edition announcement was a big deal. It was a full remaster of the original 3 games put into one package with all of the DLC besides Pinnacle Station for Mass Effect 1 due to an issue where they lost the code because an external studio built it. So I was still not involved at this point, to be totally clear. I had not gotten into the fandom yet. I did pre-order this as soon as I heard of it. And I will actually talk about why here in a few minutes. I think what it was probably most notable about this, besides the Legendary Edition, was the announcement here of, meanwhile, here at BioWare, a veteran team has been hard at work envisioning the next chapter of the Mass Effect universe. We are in the early stages of the project and can't say anything more, or can't say more just yet, but we're looking forward to sharing our vision for where we'll be going next. And it was accompanied by this art here, which has been hotly debated about what is in it. What we see is, I believe, a ship that we have come to know as the Mud Skipper, with what appears to be a human, maybe an Angara, which seems way more likely after what we heard in 2023. You'll have to wait until we get there to talk about that. A Drell and a Solarian standing outside the ship. What I do want to talk about or point out as we go through this whole video is this is one of the first references we see to what seems to be potentially a protagonist character on the left and 3 squad mates. Just keep that in mind. But I can only imagine, because I wasn't really in the fandom at this point, that this was really exciting. But this was before the Game Awards in 2020 when the trailer for Mass Effect came. We'll be looking at that here in a few minutes. But this was cool. This was also a couple years into Casey Hudson being back. This blog was posted by Casey. And then things, changed. So less than a month later, we got this blog from Laura Meal, the Chief Studios Officer at Electronic Arts, announcing that Mark Dara and Casey Hudson were both leaving BioWare. This was Casey Hudson's second time leaving. Mark Dara, I would say more known for basically all of the other BioWare games, even though I know he had some involvement in Mass Effect and even some big involvement in some of them. Looking back from 2024, this was interesting because we know now that Casey was leaving to start Humanoid Studio, and Mark was leaving to do his own thing. And he eventually returned to BioWare as a contractor to do consulting. So I have to imagine at the time this was probably very heartbreaking to have Casey Hudson leave. We have this message here, which was very interesting in my opinion, that he had sent on N7 Day the previous year, talking about this is Casey Hudson. We have so many ideas for things we want to do in Mass Effect, so much concept art that hasn't been brought to life, and so many stories to tell. And we have some of this really cool art here that has a Mako with it looks like a Krogan and a couple humans. We have this city that I don't think we've ever had pointed out to what city this could be. Another kind of just cool industrial landscape here, and then another snow planet with the famous Normandy flying around here. This is where I very much felt, in hindsight, as a fan who's getting into the series now, looks back at this and says, I assume Casey Hudson returned to BioWare, and I believe it was 2018, knowing that he was going to eventually leave for Humanoid. I assume he came back basically to do something while he was in the background putting together his studio. He announced his own studio pretty shortly after he left, and what I'm guessing and honestly kind of hoping was that these 2-ish years that he was back at BioWare, that he was basically helping them set the stage for the future of Mass Effect. If you think about this time frame, if you think about where they were at around this time, Anthem had come out and failed fairly spectacularly. Andromeda had come out and did okay, it seems like, from a financial standpoint. It kind of depends on who you talk to when you determine how it impacted the IP and the studio. When it comes to like a reputation thing, I would say overall, probably at least a slightly negative push against the franchise, neutral at best, right? And so I imagine that when he comes back, they're in kind of, okay, let's get it together and move forward mode. Now, we also, in the year of 2024, have the Dragon Age, the Veilguard coming out. And so this is around the time I assume they were also getting that project going, even though it had its own trials and tribulations. But I can only imagine in hindsight, a month after N7 Day, for whatever it was this year, with all these cool announcements, having Casey leave was probably a bit of a gut punch. And then we had this. They made this announcement on December 10th. This was the same day as the Game Awards, hosted and run by Jeff Keighley. And this is where they actually showed 2 trailers. One for Dragon Age, which was kind of a teaser trailer, and the other one was for Mass Effect. And it was this official, basically announcement or teaser for the next Mass Effect game. And we have had more than a little bit of speculation since then. So, okay, so here we have the trailer for the next Mass Effect game that they showed back in 2020 at the Game Awards. I will stop it periodically to talk about it, but here we go. I have to stop it right off the bat. We're seeing the Andromeda Galaxy on the top left, the Milky Way galaxy taking up the majority of the foreground here. At the time, in the last couple of years, I was really speculating that they were saying like, hey, we know Andromeda's out there, but we're focusing on the Milky Way. That's the camera zooms into the Milky Way. Presumably everything we see in this trailer is taking place there. I would still, even in 2024, predict that everything we've seen so far is taking place in the Milky Way. But knowing what we know now, which we'll get more into later, it seems like the Andromeda show here is not just to remember that it's there, but to maybe acknowledge that there's some crossover here. One thing to note is that all the background chatter here is kind of a quick history lesson in space exploration for humanity, starting with actual recordings from actual missions and communications from our real timeline, and then transitioning into more Mass Effect stuff, talking about first contact and things like that. This has been widely speculated to be why this trailer was temporarily taken down a year or two ago, and everyone was like, well, the initial worry was, oh my God, they're canceling this game, so they're getting rid of this trailer. And then in hindsight, we've never gotten an actual explanation. It's assumed that some of these sound clips were licensed and they had to figure out a licensing thing, or just straight up take the sounds out. But I don't know that anyone's ever actually definitely figured out what happened or what changed. So that right there has been a pretty big topic of conversation ever since this trailer came out. If you didn't hear it, someone over a PA says, Arc 6 is away, Godspeed. As far as we know, there's only 5 arcs from Andromeda. There was the Nexus and then 5 arcs with them having various fates. So that's, that there's also been an argument that the Nexus was the 6th arc and that this isn't anything new. We've never gotten any clarification, and I suspect many years from now, we'll look back and be like, oh, this is what they meant once we actually know what's going on in the next game. For now, it's a bit of a mystery, I think, but we'll have to wait and see. So that right there was obviously supposed to kind of represent the Reaper War and all the destruction of that. We saw a mass relay that seemingly is dormant or damaged, even though it doesn't actually seem that damaged. It's definitely not blown apart like we've seen at the end of the game cinematics in Mass Effect 3. But I wouldn't look too much into it. But it is important to remember that, the Arc 6 is away. The Andromeda mission launched before the Reaper War happened. And that little bit of sound, even in the last year, has become quite a topic of conversation. No one has really been able to figure out exactly what the people are saying, but there basically has been some speculation or thought that they're talking about some kind of anomaly or something that's been spotted. In theory, if everything that we've heard so far is in order of like a timeline, it's easy to presume that this is something that's happening since Mass Effect 3. And basically the speculation is that they're talking about finding like a wormhole or something like that. And when we get to the 2023 and 7-day, I'll speak a little more to that. Here we have what is the scene that comes up is fairly famous. Presumably that's that mud skipper we saw in the previous art from the 2020 and 7-day post. People have tried to figure out where this is in the Milky Way. We have a cold planet. We have 2 planetary bodies, presumably moons around them. Some people have made various speculations and guesses. I would guess this is just something they made up for this trailer, but could be wrong. Maybe there's a solid mystery behind it. So this is a pretty notable scene for multiple reasons. We end up finding out that this here is Liara walking up what at first appears to be a mountain, and then you start to notice these tubes and such, and you realize, oh, she's walking up a Reaper, presumably a dead Reaper. And then in the background, it's behind my camera. Let me see if I can, we see here, that it's the sun, and it's silhouetting what appears to be another dead Reaper. Um, this, at least for me, for the last few years, had me speculating pretty heavily, and I still pretty much fall into this category of assuming that they're going to set a canon ending to the Mass Effect trilogy. It's going to be Destroy. And to me, there's never been more of an obvious, and there's more as we go on, more of an obvious tell that this is Destroy. This is the result. These are all these dead Reapers on this planet. Why they're on this planet, we have no idea. It doesn't appear that this is like a settled planet or anything. Why would Reapers be there? Who knows? Maybe there's no good reason. Maybe there's a really great one. We'll have to wait to find out. But I still don't think very many people who have seen this realize that they are two dead Reapers in this part of the trailer. Some don't realize that's what she's walking on. Some don't realize there's definitely one in the background. Obviously, another iconic part of this teaser trailer from back in 2020, we have what is very obviously a part of the helmet of an N7 helmet, most famously worn by Commander Shepard in the trilogy. And I will point this out as what I believe is the first hint or acknowledgement or whatever to an N7 in these teasers that we've gotten over the last 3 years. I don't know what that means. We can get into that another time, but I just wanted to kind of point that out. So here we have the big reveal. Here's Liara T'Soni. She is in this kind of hooded space warm suit kind of thing. She's smiling, she's picking up, they've got some good memories here, whatever that's supposed to mean. If I go back just a little bit, we should be able to see this appears to be that Mudskipper ship again. We have, again, one character here and then 3 more in the background. I speculate this is a Salarian, a Krogan, and a human. There's been lots of speculation about the human that appears they're wearing Andromeda-style armor. Maybe the Pathfinder armor or whatever it's called. The speculation has been by some people that this is Ryder. This is one of the Ryder twins. I don't think there's any chance of that, like even a little bit. But what I have pointed out to people is that I think it's often forgotten that in Andromeda, everything in Andromeda came from the Milky Way. So it wouldn't be crazy for us to see Andromeda technology or spacesuits and stuff like that in the Milky Way, because that's where they all originated from. They didn't go to Andromeda and then start all new designs of everything. That's pretty obvious from playing Andromeda. So I don't put too much into the fact that this definitely seems like more Andromeda style armor on that human. There's a decent chance that when they gave this was an outside studio who did this trailer. When they gave them reference photos and stuff like that, they may have just seen the Andromeda armor and been like, oh, that looks really cool. I'm going to put that on this character, not really considering the implications of what that could mean. But it also may not really mean anything. But it's still something interesting to point out. The other interesting thing that's been talked about a ton is Liara. If you look near her eyes, even on her cheeks, she's got some wrinkles, some lines, and so on. There's been a ton of speculation that this is supposed to have been the first indication to us that the next game may be taking place years and years and years after the original trilogy, potentially even after the events of Andromeda, which you have to remember takes place roughly 600 years after the events of the trilogy. So, we know that Asari can live over 1,000 years. Liara, I believe, was around 100 years old in the events of the trilogy. So even if this is 600, 700, 800 years after the events of the trilogy, Liara could still be alive. That's definitely presumable. As we see more stuff, I'll get more into it. But I don't think we've seen any indication that, that ship, the Mudskipper, doesn't look like five, six, 700 years later technology from the trilogy. It looks very trilogy era esque, at least in my opinion. The lines on her face could have just been what that artist decided to do. Maybe it's just because it's higher fidelity than what they could show back in the day. I have no idea, but there's lots of theories about it. And then we get what is now a fairly famous, or at least amongst the fandom, the Mass Effect will continue branding there. We still to this day don't have an actual name for this game, but I still just the music in this trailer and everything gives me goosebumps every time. And that's what we have for 2020. We're going to jump into 2021 now. This is when I had actually gotten into the series, when I had actually played the game finally. I believe I did around 10 playthroughs in this year. Most of them complete, like did them all. I was obsessed with Mass Effect in 2021. And that's led me to this point where I still am. Maybe not to that point, but still definitely am. So now we move on to the next year. Okay, so now we enter the year 2021, and about halfway through the year, we get this blog posted by BioWare saying that Gary McKay is confirmed as studio general manager. So this was a fairly significant event. I believe Casey Hudson was the previous person in this position, and Gary had only been with BioWare since January of the previous year. So, he was relatively new, even though he had been with EA for quite a while. There's nothing really notable in this blog, but it's just worth considering. Gary's been, he's the author of many of the blogs we'll see from here on out, and is obviously a pretty prominent person in whatever is happening in the future of both Mass Effect and BioWare. And now we move on to N7 Day 2021. This one, not the craziest one. There's, as it says here in the blog, a day for looking back. That's definitely what this N7 Day was. No huge, gigantic things here. It was mostly gifts and merch and things like that. You have to keep in mind they were celebrating the very successful release of the Legendary Edition. I don't know if they've ever gone out of their way to say how many it sold. It seems like it did extremely, extremely well. They even did one of these things. I'm not going to go through all of this right now, but you're welcome to if you want to find this blog of all the statistics of people and how they had played the Legendary Edition. But here at the end, they did have a bit of a blog about moving forward. So here, just to kind of read a little bit of it. It says, N7 Day has always been a chance to talk about the future, both for Mass Effect and for the games industry as a whole. This year, we're looking forward to an even more valuable as we celebrate another N7 Day during a global pandemic. Yeah, you have to remember this was during the COVID that affects the industry and everyone in it. Down at the bottom, they say, we are, of course, hard at work on the next adventure in the Mass Effect universe. Until then, please accept our humble thanks. And it's just, so they did this. And then after this came a poster. I will post it here. I believe Mike Gamble, who's the head of the next Mass Effect game currently, posted this, and it eventually got made into a poster. If you're watching, you can see where I'm pointing here on the right side of my frame. I have the poster actually framed and mounted. There's lots to go into here, and people have picked this thing apart. Apparently, there's supposed to be like 8 or 9 things hidden in this. That was even said by Gary McKay. I don't think we've technically found them all, or at least we're not positive that we had, but I'll go over some of the basics. So we see again down at the bottom, the Mass Effect will continue branding. We have a ship here in the middle, which is really interesting. A lot of people have kind of said, oh, it kind of looks like Andromeda and stuff. I actually think it looks way older. One of the neat things about it is it has SFX on it. That is the original code name for the first Mass Effect game. It also carries the color scheme of the original Normandy and also the ship and Andromeda. It's kind of hard not to notice that the overall picture here sure looks a lot like a Geth. from the crater here, looking like their little eye flashlight thing, even having the lens flare kind of stripes, the kind of line there, and then kind of the similar shape of the head, this brownish area looking a lot like a Geth. It's also worth noting that if you zoom in here, we have what appears to be a dead Geth here. And if you look really closely around the crater, there appears to be even more dead Geth. And some have even speculated some dead Quarians, potentially, though I don't think that's been kind of a guarantee. We also have this here where I will not be doing the super zoom like I have in some other videos. Go find those if you want to see it. But we have 4 figures, again, referencing back to what I talked about before. We have what really clearly appears to be a Krogan in a big red suit. Take of that what you will. It sure looks Rex-like, but who knows? And this is where it gets real controversial. I think this looks like a Asari or a human in the front, a Turian in the middle, and sure looks like a humanoid figure with a helmet that has a red stripe in the middle right here. Again, if you want to look back at some of my videos from 2021 and 2022, I've gone over this and even done like super zoom and AI enhanced pictures and all that. Everyone has different speculation. Some people think that this one in the middle looks like it's Andromeda style armor human. I think it looks like a Turian pretty clearly. Some people don't see the stripe I'm talking about on the helmet here for this figure. Who knows? But that's what I think. This is, I believe, the second year in a row they referenced in N7. I've also made the argument multiple times that N7 equals Shepard until BioWare proves it doesn't. People have had feelings about that. That's where I still stand, and that's okay. Some of the other things in this image that people have noticed, if you kind of mess with the color grading a little bit, there appears to be potentially an N7 logo over here on the left. Who knows what that means? And even all of this kind of ripple style in the brown here. Some people have said it kind of looks, it kind of looks like the stuff from Andromeda that was clogging up the space and messing everything up. That was a big issue in Andromeda because the ships couldn't fly through it and all that. That maybe it's a reference to that. I have no idea. At the end of the day, I still think this is just a cool image, if anything, and is another thing that we will look back on one day and be like, oh, that's what that meant. And that will be really cool. Last year, we have an article from Game Rant. Not exactly the most reputable outlet in the world, but this was a pretty common thing that you'll see. And that Mass Effect 4 will be using Unreal Engine 5. I found this as well from my own research. And even just as recently in the last month or two, at least one of the kind of main developers that's working on Mass Effect as of today in 2024 was just at the big Unreal Engine fest they have, where they have panels and talk about new tech and all that. Basically, without getting too deep into all of this, this was reporting by Jeff Grubb, who seems to maybe have some decent takes from within BioWare and EA, that they've hired multiple people in the last 4 years, specifically asking for people with Unreal Engine experience, and more recently, specifically Unreal Engine 5 experience. So it's notable that the next Dragon Age game that comes out here in literally just a couple weeks is going to be on the Frostbite engine, which is what Anthem and Andromeda were on, same as Inquisition, and the engine that most EA games are on. That's starting to change a little bit, but for the most part, they're all using that in-house proprietary engine. So the idea of them moving back to Unreal Engine for the next Mass Effect is interesting, because it means that they will be bucking all of the work they've done on Frostbite, from Inquisition to Dragon Age, the Veilguard, a 10-year span of working on one engine with mixed results. So we'll have to wait and see. There hasn't been much movement on this recently. I could even see this year for N7 Day, one of the big announcements they can make is that it's going to be on Unreal. that's something they can say. It doesn't really give a ton of info. It doesn't lock them into much, but it's something that would be technically exciting to hear them point out. So I'm not really technical enough to know how big of a deal this is or how great it is. I do know from the way Unreal Engine 5 games have run on the current gen of consoles, the PS5 and Xbox Series consoles. It kind of seems like Unreal Engine 5 is waiting for the next gen to really shine. It's just a little too demanding for the current tech. But there's a pretty good chance this game is shooting for that time frame anyway. So we will have to wait and see. And that is what we had for 2021. Slightly interesting, but things have definitely picked up quite a bit since then. And now we jump into 2022. Okay, so we kick it off with a blog from January 6th of 2022. Keep in mind, this is only a few weeks later, a month or two after N7 Day. It was a mix, right? there was a mixed bag here. This was the year where they had some layoffs. They had various things happen, which it wasn't as bad as what came in 2023, which we'll get to. But this was big on them still talking about, I believe they mentioned Dragon Age in here. They do, the next Mass Effect. It's worth keeping in mind at this time, BioWare was still working on Star Wars The Old Republic. As of today, as of 2024, that team has mostly been disbanded. They were at BioWare Austin. They have now moved to a different publisher and studio, and so has the game. It's been kind of sent, not off to die. They're still working on content for it. But there was a pretty clear decision to make, and I won't be talking about this. I believe it happened in 2023. But it is worth keeping in mind that now, at this point, as far as we know, BioWare is a Mass Effect and Dragon Age studio. So, this was still good to see. I've actually been kind of surprising how we haven't been getting these updates as consistently in the last year. For a while, they were putting out blogs pretty often, not even about anything super important every time. But to me, it was just nice to be hearing from them. Here in February of 2022, this is what I was saying about them being a lot more transparent than they have been lately. They're a little busy getting the game out, I suppose. This was them officially announcing that Dragon Age was in production. This is kind of surprising because in theory, they have been in pre-production or doing some type of production on Dragon Age for a few years before this even, and then knowing that they've been doing pre-production on the next Mass Effect since at least 2020, but more than likely 2019 as well. But still getting that very clear statement of, hey, it's in full production now. Keep that in mind to a point of it's releasing 2.5 years later. One thing people don't tend to know is that games do pre-production for a long time. Often games don't actually take too long once they're in full production. And this is a decent example of that. So this whole blog was mostly just about that. It does mention Mass Effect here at the bottom. That's led by Mike Gamble. That it's a team of veteran developers and all that stuff that we always hear. But it wasn't too telling. The last line may have been, though. It says, our number one priority needs to be quality, and that simply takes time to get right. Here we had a community update. This was one that was very much focused on Dragon Age. This was before they had even actually announced the name of it, but they did have a thing here at the bottom. I was talking about the Star Wars Old Republic Legacy of the Sith expansion, which I think got canceled. I can't remember in hindsight. And they said that there's also the next game in the Mass Effect universe, which is now in early development. It's going to take a while before we can talk about it in more detail, but we can't wait to show you what we're working on. This has been a slight point of contention because people saw early development and thought, oh, they're in production. As far as I've heard, even here in October of 2024, Mass Effect is still in pre-production. They've said as much or vaguely hinted to that in recent years. But I do always, whenever I've seen this, I kind of recoil because They are just being vague. They're just vague speaking to regular folks. But to the weirdos like us who are watching this video right now, who are like hyper focused in on everything they say, as much as I wish this meant that Mass Effect has been in like some stage of production for a couple years, it doesn't appear to be that doesn't appear to be the case. Then in June of 2022, they came out and officially announced the name for Dragon Age, Dragon Age Dreadwolf. We will have a funny about this in 2023 or 2024, actually. But just keep that in mind. There wasn't anything super interesting that happened here, but I just think it's worth pointing out due to events later on. Then we got N7 Day 2022 in November. This is probably my favorite N7 Day yet. We didn't even get like a real trailer. We just got a bunch of stuff that was fun to talk about for a long time. So as we dive in, the first thing we're met with right here is there's some new concept art back there, and we will look at it more closely shortly. But there's a lot to dissect in here. This is also where they introduced Mike Gamble as the project director, Danielle Inns as the senior development director. This was actually the announcement of her position, as leading up to this point, they had that position listed. One thing to keep in mind about 2022, this is when they had, I think, like 6 director positions listed throughout that year, and they filled all of them. One of those was Mary DeMarley, who came over from another, it was a Square Enix, or I believe it was, whoever did the Deus Ex games and the Guardians of the Galaxy game, which that game, she wrote it. She's the lead writer on it. That has a direct Mass Effect kind of Easter egg reference in it, which I have really enjoyed. I enjoyed it when I played that game. That Guardians of the Galaxy game is the closest thing I think we've gotten to a Mass Effect style game really since the trilogy, in the way that the writing and stuff like that, and the story and everything. So I think we're in good hands with Mary DeMarley. And then Parrish Lay, who actually got pointed out as the franchise creative director. So in theory, that means that he is not just over this next game, but kind of over the whole franchise in general. And it's worth noting, I believe he was the cinematic director, or one of the cinematic folks in the original trilogy. So that was exciting. We go down here. I, at one point, thought this bit of art of the Normandy was a big deal. Apparently, that's from a loading screen in Mass Effect 3, so ignore me about that. We had some sim stuff. We had this here, which I won't get too much into it in this video, but this is concept art of the Citadel with a planetary body. If you don't know, the Citadel in the trilogy, in the system it's in, there's no other planets. There's nothing there. As we know, spoiler alert, at the end of Mass Effect 3, the Citadel is in the Sol system, presumably orbiting Earth. So if there is a planet in this concept art with the Citadel, I'm assuming that's the moon, and that the brightness behind the Citadel is Earth, more than likely. That concept art to this day is probably still the most like exciting thing that we've seen so far, even though it really shows the least, but I still love it. We had a bunch of merch that they announced. And then we had this. We had transmission intercepted. So they say every N7 Day is special to us, every single one. And then they had this thing here from Mike Gamble. Basically, he says that we don't have anything to tell you about the next game, but did leave us with this. And what this is updated concept art from I believe it was the 20 years of BioWare or something like that, where it was a very different looking set of art that was much more abstract. This is much more detailed, and is interesting to look at as I open it up here. This is a gigantic file, if you're wondering why it's taking so long to load. But what it is, it's pretty obviously a mass relay, or something. We have MR7. People have speculated that could be various things. It could be mobile relay 7, could be mass relay. But this appears to either be a completely man-made relay, or someone is taking pieces of destroyed relays from the end of Mass Effect 3 and trying to rebuild them. There's all kinds of other stuff in here that I think is really, really interesting to go into. We've got all these ships, which very, very much look like the kind of old school Mass Effect 1 ships, if you remember seeing the freighters and stuff like that. But it's also interesting if you look up here above my camera and then off here in the middle, this set of three. These ships very much have Nexus designs that we saw in Andromeda, with the kind of shaft of a spaceship with the four arms sticking out from the back. Not something we ever saw in the trilogy, which definitely seems to lend to the idea that this is something likely after the trilogy. Like I said about the spacesuit in the trailer before, just because something was in Andromeda doesn't mean it came from Andromeda. Almost nothing there did. So if they found a design for a ship for the Nexus that worked, that they sent off to Andromeda, it's very likely, the Nexus came from Andromeda or from the Milky Way. And so it seems like we're seeing ships in the Milky Way that are of a similar design. It's also notable that even though this relay appears to be huge, the Nexus and the Arcs were also gigantic ships and would likely not be that small if those were Arcs, which they don't appear to be. It's just cool seeing some ships of a very different design than we've seen before. There's a few things down here as well. You see that we have this numbering, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's notable that the 4 has this pedestal or this pylon sticking out. In theory, if this game is taking place after 3, it's a direct sequel to 3. So maybe this is trying to reference, hey, 4, Mass Effect 4, even though it is the 5th game. Good Lord, people, don't freak out on me about that. I acknowledge that Andromeda exists, I promise. But it does seem like that's not on accident, right? Down here at the bottom, we have a few very interesting things. This company, this was a video, and I will show it briefly. But some things on the video of this picture indicates that we are looking at like security footage or like spy footage or something. And this down here seems to be the label for that footage. And it's labeling this ship or whatever it is as a vacuum dock relay construction record. So this is a vacuum dock relay, whatever that means. Maybe it's some human tech derived from the Reapers or something, obviously in the idea of the mass relays. We also see this Green Dagger Limited. YouTubes and some other people have speculated. YouTubes is someone who watches the videos, who's very active in our Discord, pointed out that this is a reference to an actual thing that happened, a military operation, and that it suggests it could be a cooperative of alien and human work, which is kind of backed up here when you see property of Dead Space, Dihao SAV. It's the idea that that's probably a ship, the Systems Alliance vehicle or whatever, and then ship captain Sub Narvok Sehoran Zelon Jones. So that appears to be a Quarian and human name mixed. And then we have this down here, this small text, where we see 314. Some people have referenced that to the 314 relay, which is where the first contact happened between the humans and Turians. And then my favorite here is the 11790. So this seems to be a reference to N7 Day 117. And then 90 is interesting because that would be 2 or 3 years after the events of Mass Effect 3, if that's what you're looking for. Or it doesn't have the first two numbers, though. So it could be a reference to hundreds of years later. We have no idea. There's probably some other stuff here, like right here on the bottom right, it appears that there's a ship of some kind. It could be the Normandy, who knows? But we do have the footage of this, and I will try to make sure it doesn't blow your ears out. If you look closely, you will see that this is a moving picture. What I saw in this was that there's some like kind of weird random ripples. There's a little thing down here, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. And also this ship here on the right moves. The rippling is again what kind of made me think that this may be security footage or something. I don't know if we'll see it here. It's kind of hard to notice probably at the level you're seeing it, but lots of stuff came from this. So here we had people figured out that the audio of this had like a hidden audio that you had to decode. And this is what it said.
I can see it. How did we miss this? Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. Perhaps worse, they must endearing fate.
So that is Liara speaking to someone. There's been lots of speculation about that. People think the robotic voice she's speaking to must be a Geth. I think that it's just encrypted, that we just can't hear them, because the main reason I have is that it wouldn't make sense for the Geth to speak to Liara in their language. They would just speak in the universally heard language by everyone. And it just makes more sense that, maybe they've decoded her feed, whoever's listening and watching, but they haven't decoded the other side of the feed. That's been my speculation for a while. We did have Mike Gamble acknowledge here, someone who had figured this out, saying part of her line, although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. This has led a lot of people to believe that humans are trying to do something like the 314 reference to the relay. Maybe they're trying to open that relay up again. Or maybe they're trying to make their own mass relays. Maybe they're trying to make a mass relay that goes to Andromeda. Like, there's all kinds of ideas that people have had. But basically the idea is it's setting up the possibility that the next game is going to involve maybe a group of humans or humanity in general being emboldened by the results of the Reaper War and effectively being the ones who won it, obviously with everyone's help. But maybe the humans are going to be doing something to make everyone else mad in the next game, and that's what it's going to be based on. Here we have, it says it's Liara T'Soni, Dr. Shadowbroker, and Redacted. And so it's, in my opinion, acknowledging that we know she's Dr. Liara T'Soni, we know she's the Shadowbroker, and she has taken a new title of some type. And I think, again, it's going to be one of those things that one day in the future, we will know exactly what that meant. Now, Mike Gamble also posted a couple bits of concept art here. There wasn't too much to take from this one. It's hard to tell where this could be. It is interesting that here on the right side, you see a similar storefront name that we would see in Mass Effect 2, in various shop areas. We also see a Turian, a Solarian, and a Krogan here, who all appear to have like face masks on. So whatever planet they're on, at least for them, it's not breathable. I think it's really interesting to notice in this, and something else we'll look at, that all of these ships, all these Skykars, are very much Trilogy-esque. These look exactly the same as the Trilogy Skykars. If this concept art is supposed to be from 5, 6, 7, 800 years after the trilogy, I just find it hard to believe that all of their tech would still look exactly the same. If anything, I think in the post-Reaper War times, their tech would explode in complexity because of all of the stuff they're going to get to learn from the literally billions of years of history stored within all the Reapers that they're going to be able to learn from. The other bit of art is this one, which I think is a little bit more interesting. So here we have a shuttle, not just a space car, that looks exactly like the ones that we used. This also has that STX branding, the code name for the original Mass Effect. Here we have the Skycar. Here we have an Asari on this billboard. We also have these circular kind of buildings down here. The only time we've seen these before was on Ilium in Mass Effect 2. So it's at least somewhat believable that this is an Asari planet. There's multiple reasons that makes sense, including the advertisement. We also have Arya's Omega logo here. So there's maybe some indication that Omega isn't just stuck on an old asteroid anymore, that maybe she has expanded her operation. We'll have to wait and see. One big thing people have pointed out is some of these logos here that you see on the buildings. People have pointed out that we've seen these in Andromeda. Like I said before, I've always kind of pushed back and said, hey, just keep in mind, everything from Andromeda came from the Milky Way. So it's likely these things were already in the Milky Way and were taken to Andromeda, then vice versa. And it shouldn't be that crazy to think that a bunch of corporations would have sponsored and even sent their own stuff on the Andromeda mission, because at least some of the public talk about the Andromeda mission was to try to establish like trade and communication and even potentially travel between the two systems, even though the underlying reason for the Andromeda mission was fear that the Reapers were going to wipe out everyone in the Milky Way. So I love this concept art. This was, I was able to look at this for like months and make videos about it and do all kinds of talking about it. Very, very, very cool bit of art. And then here is the last thing. So I will go back quickly to look at this. You can't see it well here, but one of my big thing that kind of caught on a little bit was that this was yet another example of them kind of speculating or hinting to N7. If you look closely enough, right here above this, right here, there is a white stripe, a red stripe, and a white stripe. This continues on with my speculation that this video, that this picture was part of a video feed, and that we're seeing the reflection of who's looking at the feed, and that it appears to me to be someone in N7 armor. This is very reminiscent to the beginning of Mass Effect 1, where Shepard is looking out into space, and the first thing you see is space, and then you see his reflection in the window of the ship, and it pulls back, and we see Shepard, and it's Udina and Anderson talking about Shepard. And here you can see a little better. So right here I have the white stripe, red stripe, white stripe. People have also pointed out there's pretty obviously, I assume this is either a reflection or this is a ship in the clouds of this planet. I don't know if that means anything. There's my Microsoft Paint illustration, and then I messed around with some of the color grading and stuff to try to show it better. I still think that matters a lot. And to me, it was yet a third reference in an N7 day post, or some kind of media about the next game referencing N7. And like I said before, N7 to me equals Shepard until they prove to us it doesn't. And that was 2022. To this day, still probably my favorite N7 day. I love concept art. I loved all that stuff because it was so easy to talk about it and speculate and do all kinds of stuff. It was also before more of the focus went over to Dragon Age, it seems. And it was also before some of the bad things happened. So now we move into the next year of 2023. Okay, so we have 2023 here. This is where things went off the rails a little bit. So in August, this wasn't too long before N7 Day, it had been a really quiet year. They had done a few blogs, I believe, about Dragon Age and a few other things. But in August, they put out a blog, and this was around the time they announced a bunch of layoffs. This included layoffs of a bunch of these 50 roles that they did. Weren't just like, and any job is valuable, any employee is valuable, but a good number of these people were some of the more noted writers from BioWare. People were really mad about this. Luckily, I've noticed that most of these people seem to have landed other places or working on cool projects. But it was still pretty heartbreaking, especially for like the OG BioWare and Mass Effect fans who, some of the writers who got let go were people who had written some of the most like loved characters in the Mass Effect universe and over on Dragon Age. you know, it didn't help that they did the same thing where they said, after much consideration and careful planning, we have to build a long-term vision that will preserve the health of the studio and better enable us to do what we do best. And kind of this corporate lingo. It was nice that they put in here and pointed out that they would not be canceling any games. At the time, Dragon Age Dreadwolf, now the Veilguard, was safe. And they even pointed out, I believe in here, that Mass Effect was safe. Yeah, here it says a core veteran team led by Mike Gamble continues their pre-production work on the next Mass Effect. Our commitment to quality continues to be our North Star. So this sucked. This also led to, on N7 Day, people protesting at BioWare. There was a pretty vocal number of people talking about, you know, there was a lawsuit going on by the people who were fired because they didn't feel like they had been compensated well enough after being fired, which is totally fair. And I'm glad that they fought for themselves. And that definitely kind of sullied N7 Day last year. And that's okay. Those people weren't treated very well. And I'm glad that that got the attention it got. But we still got some other stuff. So we had the N7 Day 2023 post. This was an interesting one. So I don't think it's still in here, but if you pay attention through this, you'll notice that there's, okay, you see it here. There's random letters that are capitalized and that kind of stand out. This was a fairly mundane post. Didn't drop any big news. We had a bunch of collectibles and merch that they talked about here. Just a side note, I ordered these from Dark Horse last year, late last year, and they still haven't shipped. So if you did too, you're not the only one. We had some more stuff here, and all through that, we had some of that weird lettering where things were kind of off. Please note that this photo was not here when they initially posted this blog. So at the end here, it says, your joy, creativity, and passion help us drive forward towards the future of Mass Effect and all it may become. The team is taking their time to craft a whole new adventure for you to enjoy with new stories, characters, and experiences to fill it. At the end of the day, that's what N7 Day is all about, celebrating you and this special franchise that brings us all together. We hope that you've enjoyed the glimpse into the future of the franchise so far, and don't worry, there's more to come, but further away. So this is almost hard to read because of it. I do want to go back and point out something before I move on to what this all meant. There is a part in here where it says 11 years of N7 Days and 16 years of Mass Effect later, the franchise, here we go. This is the process of making the next game. The process is equal parts rewarding and challenging. We've asked ourselves many of the same questions that you've asked us over the years. What happened to everyone you know and love in the games? Who really died? Who had kids with who? What does a baby Volus sound like? What about all the galaxies? The endings? What the heck is going on with our Asari scientist turned shadow broker? What about, never mind, you get the idea. This is like fine because it hits a bunch of things that we do care about. You know, what about the endings? Who really did die? What's going on with everyone we knew in the games? What I'm hoping that they're teasing this stuff is, because we will get closure of that eventually, even if it's maybe kind of vague. But this last one, the what about, this is an obvious reference to Shepard, and they are going to milk that until they can't milk it anymore. So getting back to all the codes here, what that led to was this website. Now, when this website initially got found, it said some different stuff. And essentially what it was over, gosh, it was like 4 hours. They released these little bits, these 10-second bits of this trailer. And it came with these kind of weird encryptions and all this, to the point where one of them specifically mentioned some type of alert being sent from Andromeda. And that, more than anything at this point, well, almost more than anything, has really led a lot of us to believe that there is something Andromeda related, that either this game is taking place many years after the trilogy, or the wormhole thing theory from back in that 2020 trailer, that something weird is going on. Now, just so we can reference it appropriately, here is this very, very short trailer. So obviously, everyone's been going nuts over this for a couple years now, or not a couple years, since last year. I was only frustrated by this because when they released this, it they released it in such a way where everyone who was watching a live stream with me thought for sure when they released the last bit and this character turns around, it was going to be Shepard. And instead, it was this character in this helmet. Now this character is obviously an N7. We have the stripes. We even have, if you see the back of their armor, this is very, very much a similar design as the old N7 armors. And then we get this kind of funky Daft Punk helmet. We have the clear N7, this really cool kind of jacket, armor, whatever they're wearing. They pull out this gun that looks somewhat vaguely similar to some of the ones that we've seen back in the trilogy. And one thing I did find kind of interesting is you can see that it appears there's a ship back here. I don't know if this is the Mud Skipper or a different ship. They appear to be on some windy planet or space station or something. Because even earlier in the trailer, you can see out the windows that there's like vehicles flying by, and that it's kind of hazy outside. And you can see out these like street lamps and stuff like that. People have tried to figure out if there's like characters and stuff back there. Obviously, a lot of this stuff is kind of intentionally vague. After that, Mike Gamble put out this picture. This is a picture of, we get a better version of the gun. We don't have the Mass Effect Will Continue logo here though. But then everyone zoomed into this. I don't know how much I can get in here right now. Here we go. And what it appears to be is a bar scene of some type in some kind of club. And there's all kinds of stuff in here. Let me make sure I'm out of the way enough. So there is a Hanar with jewelry. There are jellyfish as well, which I would think would be offensive to them. There is a Turian with a visor, just like Garrus's. But I don't think it's Garrus. We've got a couple really chunky Volus back here. We've got some Krogan here. We have back here what appears to be a Geth, which if this is post Reaper War, if they are doing the destroy ending as canon, how did we get Geth back? There appears to be right here a Angara, speaking to what appears to be a Asari. Just for reference, this is a really low poly version of this picture. There's a much, much, much better one that people have actually looked at. So there's some craziness here. We're seeing Angara, we're seeing Geth. There's no reason for Angarans and Geth to be in the same place. Even, it doesn't make any sense. So seems to be pretty signaling. A really interesting one that you can't see well in this picture is right here. This, in my opinion, is 100% the first time we've seen a Ralloy in Mass Effect. And that they're hinting to that we may be seeing some of these species that existed in the trilogy, but we just never saw them, mostly due to tech limitations. But the Ralloy are a kind of bird, a humanoid bird species that kind of secluded themselves before the events of the Reaper War because they thought that they could hide and get rid of their technology and that they'd be able to survive the Reaper onslaught. So it seems like maybe that worked because here, especially on the high def version, we appear to see a Ralloy in this picture. So, really cool poster. I kind of wish I would have gotten the poster back when it came out. Following this or around this time, Mike Gamble was doing these vague posts like, not everything is as it seems. This was when people were freaking out about, oh, this game is taking place way in the future. Why isn't Angara in there? Oh, that means all of our trilogy people are dead. Like people were kind of like freaking out in good and bad ways. And I feel like he kind of threw that out there to be like, just chill out. Like, don't freak out too much yet. This is a especially frustrating one where he pointed out they still haven't found the other part, the one I was afraid of them finding. So to this day, here in October of 2024, we don't know if there was something we missed in this picture, in the little trailer they showed, or maybe there was something we missed entirely. There may have been a whole website that we missed or links somewhere that we didn't click on. So there could, even to this day, be some N7-day reveal from last year that we just never saw. I have no idea. And I believe there was like a potential that if Mass Effect won some award at the Game Awards, he was going to reveal something. I can't remember if that was this year or the previous year. But yeah. So, and then in the fallout of this was this kind of, I'll call it interesting take from Jeff Grubb, where he doesn't think the game is going to come till 2029. Even though in my opinion, that's kind of in the face of a lot of other, I believe, more accurate predictions. And basically what happened is on one of Jeff Grubb's shows, he said, Dragon Age Dreadwolf took this many years to make. Therefore, I think it's going to take that many years for them to make the next Mass Effect, which I push back on pretty heavily. The Veilguard, as far as we know, or has been rumored, went through basically multiple reboots of even what type of game it's going to be. Then it went through COVID, which completely upended game development for basically every studio. And then it seems like they basically did the principal full production of this game in like 2.5, 3 years of the Veilguard. I don't think we should assume that the next Mass Effect is going to have the same issues. I also believe the next Mass Effect is going to have a lot of weight on it for BioWare to perform and make money for EA, because it's almost certain the Veilguard is not going to make that much money. It's been in production for a really long time, and they haven't had a big financial success in a while. So I push back on this a little bit, but who you believe, me or Jeff Grubb? I know how that argument's going to go most of the time, but I figured that it was at least worth pointing out here. Before I'm not going to make you wait. We're just going to jump right into 2024, because all I have here is this post that happened in June, just a few months ago, where they renamed Dragon Age the Dreadwolf to Dragon Age the Veilguard. They've said they did this because Dreadwolf insinuated that one of the characters was going to be the focus of the next game, when the focus is really going to be on the cast of characters you're playing with, which is the Veilguard. And so they've given good explanations for this. It's just strange that a few months before this game came out, they renamed it, even though they had only given us the name of it, a year or two before. This is why I've speculated a lot that we could potentially get a name for the next Mass Effect, but that may not be worth much if we know that they could, in theory, change the name a few months before it comes out. I didn't get everything in this video. There's not a chance I did. If you want to talk about those things, feel free to hit them up down in the comments of the YouTube video. I just wanted to do a fairly comprehensive look at everything that I remember that we've seen, give some of my thoughts on it and stuff like that. I'm still very positive about the next Mass Effect. It really looks like the Veilguard is on track to have a really good reception, probably get a good score, probably have pretty good sales. And I really hope that's going to kind of push BioWare into this new era for them. Maybe, hopefully, people stop trying to ask for them to be the old BioWare, because they aren't. They're never going to be the old BioWare again. That doesn't make any sense. What I'm hoping for is that this is going to be a chance for them to get back on their feet, to kind of get past Anthem and Andromeda, and to kind of move into a new era for BioWare, because I really want more Mass Effect games. There's so many things to still explore in that franchise, and I would love to see it and see what they're doing. I will admit that the 2023 in 7 Day basically blew up all my theories. I had so many like really intricate theories about the next game. I don't have any anymore, honestly. What I'm hoping for from this next in 7 Day is going to be something like 2022. Show us a bunch of concept art, give us some teases, give us some stuff to figure out. Maybe if there is something we missed from 2023, just tell us. That'd be cool. Maybe confirm that you're using Unreal Engine 5. Maybe give us a hint to the name of the game. I don't know. I've seen people that want them to confirm if Shepard is going to be in the next game or not, or the time frame the game will be set in, or stuff like that. I would love that. That would be great. I think they're going to hold those cards for years at this point. There's also the chance that this in 7 Day will basically not show us anything. They've been cracking down on Dragon Age the Veilguard. We're under the impression a decent amount of the Mass Effect pre-production team has been helping, or did at some point help, over on the Veilguard. So there's a chance they just haven't had time to do a lot of stuff for this in 7 Day. They also may not want to take away attention from the Veilguard, or they may try to you leverage the attention on BioWare because of Dragon Age to get attention on their next project, get people excited. A lot of this early teasing stuff is actually more for hiring than it even is for the fans. They want to show people like, hey, we're working on cool stuff. Come work with us. So I don't know. I don't know what this N7 day is going to be like. I'm hoping for the best. I'm expecting nothing, and I'm just going to try to enjoy it. As for my plans for that day, I plan on streaming a decent part of the day. I'll maybe play some Dragon Age on stream, maybe some Legendary Edition of Mass Effect. At some point in the day, I believe that Kala Elizabeth, N7 Legend, and myself will be doing some type of conference call and doing kind of a live show to either talk about what they've shown or do some speculation and things like that. And then I will, I plan on being pretty active that day. So be sure to check me out either here on YouTube or over on Twitch, or check out my socials and stuff like that. All those links are in the description of this video. So there it is. There's my big video that is basically just a long podcast instead of a good video. I hope if you got this far, you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you're thinking. If there's things that I obviously missed, if you disagree with me on some of my speculation or some of my opinions, I'm happy to have that discussion if you're nice, and give me all of that. If you like the video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel if you want more Mass Effect, BioWare, or just gaming coverage in general. Consider, maybe being a YouTube member if you want videos like this early, if you want some other perks, or if you just want to support all of the content I make, including videos, podcasts, and streams. If you want to see my other content or figure out ways to support what I do, check out the links in the description of the video. That is all I have for this one. So until next time.